A quick word before we get into today's podcast. Our dogs are a huge part of the family, and like any dog owner, I want to ensure that they are getting the proper stuff. And this is why we absolutely love Butternut Box. They just make it incredibly easy to feed your dog well. Every single plan is perfectly portioned and tailored precisely to your dog's age, breed, and lifestyle. They have over 11 recipes to choose from, so if you have a fussy eater or a dog with allergies, they're sorted. The meals are delivered straight to your door frozen, so you never run out. You just leave a few pouches out in the fridge to defrost, and you're good to go. Plus, you can now find them in Maxi Zoo stores if you need to grab a pack. It leads to better digestion and healthier guts, which every dog owner can appreciate. Go to butternutbox.com/lines of inquiry and use the code lines of inquiry to get 50% off your first 2 boxes today.
GoLoud.
My name is John Sweetman, and this is Lines of Inquiry Case Notes. In Case Notes, we step away from telling one specific case in detail and instead take some time to reflect, to revisit past investigations, and to respond directly to you, the listener. These episodes are about opening up the conversation. We'll be speaking with expert guest contributors, diving a little deeper into the issues behind the stories, and responding to some of the much valued correspondence that comes into our mailbox. If you have a message you'd like to share, a case you'd like us to revisit, or someone you'd like to hear from on future episodes of Case Notes, you can get in touch with us at linesofinquiry@goloudnow.com, and be sure to follow us on Instagram at Lines of Inquiry Podcast to keep up to date. Joining me is Darren Cleary, the creator of Lines of Inquiry and head of digital audio at Bauer Media Audio Ireland. Darren, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, John. Thanks for having me.
So Darren, we'll start by going back to a case we covered in the first season of the podcast, when we first covered the death of Kelly Lynch. Her family were waiting for the outcome of a Garda peer review into the original investigation, and that review has now concluded. So what do we know about the findings?
Yeah, the peer review has reported back now, John. In late June, Kelly's family met with the review team and presented with the findings. Her mother, Julianne Lynch, says the review identified more than 20 deficiencies relating to investigative failures or recommendations. That is Julianne's description of what the family were told. The report itself has not been published, and it won't be, so we're not independently able to verify those findings. But Garda have confirmed that the review produced recommendations that the investigative team at Monaghan Garda Station is working through. There's already some observations being examined by FISRU. They are the Office of the Police Ombudsman, or the Garda Ombudsman now under that new title. Yeah. And the file is being prepared now by the coroner. So this is no longer really a family alleging that mistakes were made. There's some form of vindication, I guess, there for Kelly Lynch's family, because the external Garda review, or the peer review, it's not really external, it's still done by guards, has identified matters that required action and recommendation.
And like the number 20 sounds quite substantial, but a recommendation is not necessarily a finding of misconduct or even, a failure in the original investigation. But before we go into what the review found, can you kind of give us a reminder of the original circumstances of the case?
Yeah, so this happened on the 17th of March 2024. Kelly was a young lady. She was 23 years old when her body was found in the Ulster Canal near Horseshoe Bridge in Monaghan town on the early hours going into St. Patrick's morning. The Garda position has been that Kelly wandered away alone. She suffered a fall from a height at that bridge and entered the canal, where she lay undetected for over a day. Her death has not publicly or privately been classified as suspicious, and Gardaí have not treated it as suspicious even after this peer review. But there were answers that her family needed. There were 93 separately documented injuries on Kelly's body. Those injuries ranged from relatively minor cuts and abrasions to serious injuries like a fractured sternum and broken vertebra in her neck. And her family questioned how that number and the pattern of injuries could be reconciled with a single accidental fall. They also questioned decisions made at the scene in terms of preservation and the integrity of the initial investigation investigation, how well it was done, how thorough it was done. Her aunt made a reference to when she came upon the scene, having been told the terrible news, she was shocked to find that there was no cordon there, there were no Gardaí standing at it. So those concerns included the failure to preserve and examine potential evidence related to the scene. The family would have expected that done to a different level or a higher level. The clothing was returned very early on. We understand forensic examination likely took place, but the family questioned why it was able to be brought back to their possession so quickly and so clearly. And it was something, John, you touched in an episode of Case Notes just last week about, you know, the importance of the chain of custody.
Yeah.
They wondered if this stuff was to be vital in any kind of future investigations or prosecutions. Having it back may damage that. So they had a number of questions and a number of concerns that they raised to the guards and to Fitzroy and publicly as well.
And can we say, like, what the review of the investigation found? Like, did it address any of those questions that the family had?
Yeah, so the review is not published. It was communicated the outcome of the review to Julianne, which is Kelly's mother, and she says the peer review team objectively examined the investigation. They identified where standards had fallen short or not met what should have been done, and they made 20 findings relating to the investigative failures. Now, they could be very, very minor things. 20 findings may sound like a lot, but this is fine-tooth comb stuff that they'll be going through, and this could be, to your point, John, on last week's episode, this could be a signed, dated signature. There are many things that could be deficiencies, from, you know, minor paperwork issues to more major issues. The Gardaí have not adopted the word deficiencies publicly. This has been something that the family have said, nor have they actually confirmed that number themselves. So they said they term it as recommendations, and that they've confirmed there are recommendations that the Monaghan investigative team is working through, and that some observations made by their peer review team are already subject to a separate examination by Fitzroy, who are the Garda ombudsman.
But as you say, that they haven't detailed what these recommendations or findings are.
No, and they're very much internal workings. The nature of a peer review, it's not a external inquiry. It's not an independent inquiry. It's guards looking at the homework of other guards,
I suppose,
essentially.
by definition, it's a peer review. So it's Gardaí investigating, not investigating other Gardaí, but investigating if proper procedures were followed in an investigation.
But I think what is really important for Kelly Lynch's family is that this review didn't simply endorse every aspect of the original investigation. When we covered this story, we laid out in detail the circumstances surrounding it, from how Julianne Lynch and Kelly's father and brothers and sisters found out about how she passed away, the breakdown of communication between the PSNI and the Gardaí this side of the border. I think probably from the family's point of view, there's some level of vindication that they felt that they could have received better treatment, that Kelly could have received better treatment. And that stands to reason in these 20 recommendations. I don't think there would be 20 recommendations made if everything was done perfectly, which in this case, it seems very clear it wasn't.
And, you know, as we speak now, there's still nothing really happening, you know, like, as I understand it, there still hasn't been an official inquest into Kelly's death. So is there any indication of if that's on the way or what? Like, because we're talking about, you know, it was in the recent documentary talking about conflicting medical opinions with say an independent pathologist had looked at the findings of the post-mortem carried out on Kelly and came to a different conclusion. And, you know, the documentary sets that out very starkly. Does this mean that, you know, with this review, that the Gardaí are taking that on board? Or I think a lot would hinge on the inquest.
Yeah, for sure. And look, the original post-mortem examination was conducted through the state pathologist's office, and that concluded that Kelly died by drowning following a fall. There was a subsequent desktop review by a second state pathologist. It disagreed with drowning as the finding of cause and did suggest hypothermia was more likely. Now, this would be
a separate pathologist within the office of the state pathologist.
Correct.
So that was a different pathologist than the first.
And they're working off paper. They've never seen Kelly. They're only working off the findings and the injuries and the patterns. But interestingly, they went with something different. Now, a third pathologist has also come into this story and has been acting on behalf of the family, commissioned by the family, and the Katie Trust, which is the organisation that is supporting them. They commissioned a further review. It was done by Dr. Fintan Garvin, and his conclusion to the first two was fundamentally different. So the independent report found no pathological evidence of drowning conducted by Dr. Fintan Garvin. It identified a number of injuries as having potentially occurred after death. It outlined an alternative mechanism of death, and it was indicating third-party involvement. Now, Dr. Garvin's view is that Kelly most likely died following some form of assault, which was highly violent. He disputed aspects of the fall theory and spoke about this at length in the RT documentary. His feeling was while serious injuries to Kelly's sternum and vertebra could be considered consistent with a fall from a height, he questioned why a fall of that nature had not caused multiple rib fractures, which you would usually see from something like that. He also maybe raised the question of a sternum injury. Could that resulted from something else, maybe potentially CPR or some manner of that? So there are three materially different medical interpretations from the experts that have looked at that. The first is drowning, the second was hypothermia, and the third one is violent assault. And
that independent pathologist, he would have had access to the same material as you mentioned, the second pathologist looking at it. I assume he had access to pretty much the same material.
Yeah, so the family, it seems, would have shared it with it. The nature of these things is that the conduct and the contact goes specifically between the family and the apparatus of the state. So you would imagine, we can't be certain, but our understanding would be that he would have had access to the same documents.
Yeah. And we have a statement today from the guards in relation to this case. Is that basically the statement outlining the findings of the peer review?
Yeah, so the statement I'll read out from the Garda press office today. The investigation into the death of Miss Kelly Lynch remains open and continues to be carried out by an investigation team based at Monaghan Garda Station. The investigation included an official state post-mortem carried out by the State Pathologist's Office. On the 21st of October 2024, the Garda Commissioner Drew Harris and Chief Superintendent Alan McGovern, Louth Cavan Monaghan Division, met with the family of Miss Lynch and listened carefully to their concerns. Following this meeting, the Garda Commissioner directed that a senior investigating officer from a division external to the Louth Cavan Monaghan Division conduct a peer review of the investigation into the death of Miss Lynch. The peer review has now been concluded. The peer review team has met with the family of Miss Lynch and their representatives to discuss the peer review findings, which included a recommendation that a file is to be prepared for the coroner. A number of observations made by the peer review team are already subject to a FISRU examination. An Garda Síochána cannot comment on any matter that may be subject of those FISRU investigations. However, it is important to clarify that the matters currently under examination by FISRU do not concern the cause of death or suggest that the outcome was altered by the matters under investigation. The investigation team at Monaghan Garda Station is currently working through the recommendations of the peer review team and preparing a file for the coroner. An Garda Síochána appeals to anyone with direct information on the death of Miss Lynch to contact Gardaí.
Yeah, so really, as you say, like they're preparing a file for the coroner, which, you know, will hopefully lead to an official inquest and maybe more questions being answered. So it's certainly a story that I have a feeling we're going to be coming back to.
Yeah, I would think so. And the fact that they're still appealing for witnesses, they're still appealing for anyone else to come forward. They haven't closed the book on this. Yeah. It's still an open case, but they have not changed their position on how Kelly died, it seems. For me, the most important sentence in that statement is the matter is currently under examination by FISRU. Do not concern the cause of death or suggest that the outcome was altered by the matters under investigation. That is the line Gardaí want understood by everyone, and that is, while there may have been issues with aspects of the original investigation, which has resulted in recommendations, Gardaí do not accept that those issues affected the conclusion that the death was non-suspicious.
We all want our dogs to live the happiest, healthiest lives possible, but a lot of standard dog food out there just isn't cutting it. That's where Butternut Box comes in. Their mission is simple: to deliver health and happiness to dogs and their humans. They use high-quality, whole ingredients that are so good they've actually been taste tested by humans. When your dog starts eating better food, you see the results directly. More excitement at mealtimes, a shinier coat, and a much happier gut. It's not about being fancy, it's just about giving them real food that brings out the best in them. If you want to make the switch, head over to butternutbox.com/lines of inquiry. Use the promo code Lines of Inquiry at the checkout and they'll give you a massive 50% off your first 2 boxes. Your dog will thank you for it.
How tense is a crime scene, John?
It's not really tense. It's not tense. I wouldn't say tense. For me, anyway, it would go through a spectrum of things. You'd have when you would arrive at the scene, and depending on what the job is, if it's involving a dead body or whatever, there's always a trepidation. What am I going to see? And it's not just the sights, it's the sounds, it's the smells, it's all these bits and pieces. What's ahead of me? What amount of work do I think this is going to be? And, there is sometimes obviously that kind of initial shock to the senses or whatever, but very, very quickly that goes away. And I've spoken about that before. You just get down to the job at hand and you become hyper aware of your surroundings, but you just get down to the job at hand. You know that everybody that's part of the team and the investigating Gardaí, even the member outside with the book taking the names of the people coming and going, everybody has a job to do. So you just get along with it. And you're almost, when you're working a scene, be it an indoor scene or an outdoor scene, you're in a bubble. You're not under any time constraint, or at least you shouldn't be. And there isn't that pressure, you're there to do the job and it'll take as long as it's going to take. I wouldn't use the word tense. I do, we're focused, but still at the same time, not like robots.
Yeah.
You're there to do the job and, there's different phases in the job. Okay, for example, let's use the murder scene or the suspicious death scene, like the initial survey of the scene. You don't usually go picking things up or taking exhibits until obviously it's completely recorded by the photographer and then the deceased, and all around the deceased who is the most important exhibit. And I don't mean that in a derogatory term, but they're the most important thing at the scene. So that's the first thing that has to be taken care of, and that involves obviously recording everything in situ around the body, and then the body has to be removed from the scene and the post-mortem. So it's really, that's the first stage of it. And then it's usually afterwards, unless there is a delay for some reason in the post-mortem, you go back to the scene and you process the scene over however long it takes. And back in the old days, it didn't end there, because everything you took from the scene still had to be examined back at base, back at headquarters. But now it's changed since the merger with FSI, Forensic Science Ireland, in 2019. The teams now, the bureau teams that go to jobs, go to scenes, we can call them jobs, but whatever they take from a scene, be it fingerprint lifts, fibres, all the exhibits and all that, that's just brought back, handed over to FSI, and they don't have to worry about it anymore, So there's less work involved, with less kind of, work back at base involved. So like it used to be, you could be back working on exhibits from a job you've just returned from, and another job will come in and there's nobody available and you're away again and you still have all this stuff. But now that doesn't happen. So there's always plenty of people available to go if a team is called. And
that's what I wonder, does timing play a part in the quality of the investigation? Like when you look at the story like Kelly Lynch that we talked about at the top of this episode, if that doesn't happen on St. Patrick's Day morning, does that investigation look materially different? Is there a technical bureau team called in? Is there, all the stuff that would entail?
With the Kelly Lynch case, and I can only speak from personal experience, having gone to suspicious or unexpected deaths in an outdoor circumstance. The moment the body is discovered, and if there's any question at all about the circumstances of the death, then it's my experience that, the scene would be preserved if it's going to be examined, or if there's going to be a post-mortem carried out.
Is that harder to do on St. Patrick's Day? Is it a resource thing of just...
It shouldn't be. And again, I can only speak from personal experience. If St. Patrick's Day, a public holiday, in personal experience, you would have members crawling out of the woodwork because it's a bank holiday and you're getting a few extra quid. I can understand maybe logistically if you're blocking parade routes and stuff like that, that may come into it, but it shouldn't affect the course of things. Like, again, I'm only, and I keep repeating myself, I can only say from my, well, I'm not guessing, I can say from my own personal experience that if a suspicious death occurs or an unexpected death, especially a 23-year-old girl who had been missing for over 24 hours before she was found, I would have expected in a case like that the scene would have been held until the findings of the pathologist were made known to the local Gardaí. It may not always be the case that a technical bureau team is called. Some divisions down through the years, particularly Cork, certainly back in my time, used to handle nearly all of the suspicious death cases and stuff themselves. Was they were very, very well organised and experienced divisional scenes of crime people. And that's not taken away from scenes of crime people all over the rest of the country. But that decision for a scene to be examined, be it by local level scenes of crime officers or a technical bureau team, is usually made by a district officer being the superintendent. So, I watched the Kelly Lynch documentary, and I obviously was familiar with most of the stuff, having, as you said, we covered it in an earlier episode of Lines of Enquiry. But I find it odd, is the word I'd probably use, that there wasn't a scene. As far as I'm aware, there wasn't a scene. And regardless of whatever the findings may have been from the post-mortem, if the post-mortem found suspicious circumstances, which it didn't, anything at that scene from a legal perspective is pretty much of no use, because if you go down the line possibly a couple of years later, and if there was any, I'm not just talking about the Kelly Lynch case, but say you're talking about a case where a scene wasn't preserved and subsequently there are court proceedings down the line, and the prosecution intended to bring forward evidence based on exhibits or items or whatever found at that scene, it's very easy for the defence to argue that, well, the integrity of these objects or these exhibits is gone because there was no preservation. And it's a thing of always closing the barn doors before the horses bolt, just to be sure.
Not after.
And, I find that strange. And I would imagine that the peer review has looked into some of those things on the Kelly Lynch one, yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode of Lines of Enquiry Case Notes. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review, sharing it to your story on social media, leaving a comment below, or simply telling a friend you enjoyed it. Your support helps us make more episodes. If you'd like to get in touch, you can email linesofenquiry@goloudnow.com. Lines of Enquiry is presented by me, John Sweetman. The podcast is created by Darren Cleary. Our executive producer is Owen Brennan, and Aoife Plunkett and Siobhan Walsh are our producers. Remember, in the end, everything done in the dark comes to light.